Anne-Marie now is heading up the Bee Informed Partnership, BIP, and you're probably all aware of the amazing surveys that BIP has done over the years to track honeybee losses, where those losses come from, opinions of the beekeepers, and these are figures that media and the government uses to track our industry. So really looking forward to hearing what Anne-Marie has to say. A big round of applause for Anne-Marie.
So I'm really honored to be here today. And I know that many of you have said the same thing, but again, you look at the roster. And when I was invited to begin with, I thought, what can I say, right? I don't know that I have a super great journey through bees. In fact, I started with bees a little late. I will tell you a little bit about myself, but really, the best thing about me is that I work with a ton of fabulous people. And those fabulous people are really, I think, working together, just like in a hive, to make something really cool happen. So that's really what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about Bee Informed Partnerships worker bees. I'm one of them, but I'm only one of them. And nothing that we do at Bee Informed Partnership could happen if we didn't work together. So we have a really diverse community, and since this is, being diverse, I just want to highlight the fact that more than half of our team is female. And in there, we have even more diversity. We have a trans woman working with us. We actually have an African American in the field working with commercial beekeepers in North Dakota. We have a European, we have a Canadian. We also have a disabled person working in the wheelchair in the field at all times. So I think that the Bee Informed Partnership is filled with these amazingly diverse people that all bring in, an eighth of a teaspoon of honey to make the crop every year. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. But I thought I could talk to you about the story of BIP. How did BIP arrive? So who here knows what BIP is? Bee Informed Partnership. Okay, so there's quite a few of you that don't. So I'm glad, because I'm going to tell you a little bit about BIP today. I'm going to give you its story, how it was born, how it was conceived, what we do. But I'm going to do that through the lens of the women that have helped to build it, since, most of the theme of this conference was about women. So you ready? We're going to get started. Just before I start the story, I need to set the stage, right? There's a stage to be set, and thank you for bringing your comment up, because I was going to do that, but now I don't have to. So I need you to just kind of flash back to 2007. It's breaking news. In 2007, it's a young Tom Brokaw who actually says, big crisis is happening, and you see the faces of beekeepers. Beekeepers all over across America are losing bees. They have coined the term colony collapse disorder. What are we going to do about our pollinating and our food, et cetera? Anyway, it's really dire. They were coming up with this CCD, and at the time, and this is what I'm going to do throughout the presentation, I'm going to be using this BIP timeline. And the timeline starts in 2007 with the stage that I'm setting up right now. And then after that, it goes to the creation of BIP. And after that, it goes to the growth of BIP. And then we're in the evolving phase of BIP. So I'm going to add to this timeline as we go through. But just remember, the stage here is breaking news, CCD, that colonies are dying. So it starts with this guy. And so David Hackenberg is a commercial beekeeper, and at the time was traveling from Pennsylvania to Florida, bringing his bees from one to the next. And in 2007, he calls up these two guys. You see those two photos? Top guy is Dennis Van Engelsdorp, who was at the time the Pennsylvania apiary inspector, as well as the president of Apiary Inspectors of America at the time, 2007. And he was Pennsylvania, and Jerry was the Florida apiary inspector at the time. So David Hackenberg calls his inspectors and he says, my bees are dying. They're all dead. Come and see this. So these guys go, and of course, it's the whole story, as you all know. So now they realize, so these two guys, Dennis and Jerry, kind of look at each other and say, okay, but we have nothing to compare this with. Oh, and by the way, I'm telling this story and I'm simplifying it. So anyway, they realize that they don't really have a good baseline. So yeah, he's losing colonies, but who else is losing colonies? How many people, how many colonies are lost every year? We didn't know. We had no idea at the time. So they get on the phone And they start calling beekeepers. And that year, I think they called about 384 beekeepers to try to figure out how many losses they had had. And so this is the famous graph that you see it. We're trying to change it just because we're tired of seeing it. But you can see that the first data that shows up here is data from the year 2006, 2007 that happens and looking at colony losses. And that comes from the work that Jerry and Dennis did together in order to call these beekeepers to try to figure out, how many colonies were lost that year. That was the first baseline for colony losses in the US. And from there came this publication here, an estimate of managed colony bee losses, on which that was from Dennis, Robin Underwood, Jerry Hayes, Dewey Karen that wrote that. And I do want to point out, which I think is very important, that these surveys all started at the Apiary Inspectors of America, right? There was no BIP at the time. There was nothing like that. But these guys, as Kim was pointing out earlier, don't have a lot of means. I don't know if you know, but creating, administering, managing, storing, analyzing all of these data is a huge deal. And that was probably a little too much for the Apiary Inspectors of America program at the time to take on. And so that is, my friend, the reason why BIP was created in the first place. That was the kernel, the idea, that was the impetus for BIP, for Bee-Informed Partnership. And so that was 2007, right? Pre-BIP. And what Dennis at the time did is he built a team around in order to write a large grant in order to figure out how to get this survey and all of this information so we would have a baseline for colony losses in the US. This is our first worker bee for the Bee-Informed Partnership. So this is really interesting because most of you, who here has heard of Dennis van Engelsdorp? Probably many of you. How many of you have heard of Karen Rennick? Not so many. She's kind of like the woman behind the man. So they write the grant together. So I want to talk to you about Karen. She's our first worker bee. She is a really fantastic lady. She's one of my greatest mentors. And she has so much energy, and she has know-how, and she has everything. I love her. So Karen was actually an ocean engineer, and she worked at the Johns Hopkins Institute for 14 years developing sensor systems for the military and the Navy. And she became a beekeeper while she was doing this, and all of a sudden she had like this epiphany, and she says, I want to give back. I want to do something more than just, create these sensor systems. And so at the time she saw this job opening, because Dennis was with the Apiary Inspectors of America, he was also running the APHIS National Honeybee Disease Survey, which is different than the colony loss survey. And I need to make a little parenthesis here, because I think people, you throw the word survey around and everybody gets kind of like confused. So the APHIS National Honeybee Disease Survey is a survey where we survey bees, right? We take bee samples and we survey bees for diseases and bees for, potential threats. So it's really a survey of bees. The survey that the Bee-Informed Partnership will do later on, and that was started, with apiary inspectors, was a survey of beekeepers, calling them on the phone to see how many colonies they've lost, right? So APHIS, survey of bees, colony loss and management, BIP survey, survey of beekeepers. So hopefully that's clear. And so she's working with Dennis on this, and so she gets roped into this whole idea. Dennis is fantastic. He has more ideas than anybody I know. The guy can rattle out like 500 million new ideas. He's really, really great at generating ideas. You have ideas, but you have to actually kind of carry out those ideas. How do you do that, right? So Karen is the person. She's the little engine that makes all of this happen. So that's why Karen is basically the founding executive director of BIP. And when she hired me back, you'll see that later on, I learned pretty much a lot from Karen. And those who have worked with Karen have always really liked her. So she's the first worker bee of the Informed Partnership. So the next one comes, and at the same time, while Dennis and Karen are coming up with their ideas and writing this grant, Marla on the side, as Jackie, you kind of started the story for me, Marla actually was wondering why queen breeders were not doing any sort of hygienic testing for selection for their stocks. And so she told me on the phone, she says, Anne-Marie, I just grabbed the microscope, because at the time they thought nosema had something to do with, selections and whatever they wanted to do. So she grabbed that microphone, she hopped on the plane, and she says, I went knocking on the doors of beekeepers. And she says, I learned lots of really important lessons during that trip. She says, the first one is that commercial beekeepers are really, really suspicious of scientists. And she says, the second one I heard is that you really can't say anything about one operation to the other operation, because she says they can say whatever they want between them, but you can't say it. And I guess she got chastised by one commercial beekeeper in particular, and she says, okay, we got to figure this out. It's got to all stay, confidential. And so at the same time, but the next lesson she learned is that beekeepers were saying, okay, so those of them that said, sure, show us what you got, she showed them how to, find nosema spores, and she showed them how to do the freeze kill brood assay with the liquid nitrogen. And a lot of the beekeepers, including our very own Jackie Park Burris, were very interested in this, but they said, you know what, we need help doing this. There's equipment involved, there's all of this stuff. How can we get support to do this? And so that's when Marla thought about it. And in Canada, they had the ideas of the tech transfer team that were part of the universities. And they were doing this work, really, they were also a governmental entity. So Marla kind of changed the idea, and she says, we need a tech transfer team in Northern California to work with these queen breeders to do all of this work. And she says, how about I bring this idea to Karen and Dennis, who are now writing this big grant, and make that part of the grant. So that is exactly what Marla did, our little worker bee. And I need to say that we never disclose who our members are. We never say who participates in our program. We never share any information. We're totally confidential. And here I am showing you Jackie's photo, right? But that's because Jackie actually markets and is very proud to say that she's a founding member of the BIP Tech Transfer team. And so I feel confident that I can do that with her here in the room, but I would never normally do that. So next thing is, at the very, very beginning, Dennis and Karen and a whole team of other people from a bunch of different universities, I think there was like 40 of you to start with. There was a person that was very important that's still there today that helped quite a bit, and that's Michaela Wilson. You can just imagine that these surveys and all of these data collection, they all need to be stored somewhere. So we needed to start from scratch building a database. I'm not an IT person. A lot of this information goes right over my head, but I will try to repeat some of the stuff that Michaela told me. So Michaela has a really interesting background because she studied fine arts and botany and entomology and anthropology and all sorts of different things, because there was no IT degree back then. And she's our IT guru now. But it's all really interesting because she was in entomology, always, kind of interested in bugs and bees, and she started her own beekeeping. But she went to school, she was at the University of Tennessee, and she found a job on campus as a student record employee. And at the University of Tennessee at the time, they had the biggest computer cluster. It was an IBM machine, and she got trained to work on that thing. So you can just imagine that she is now our, IT guru, but those were her humble beginnings, which I think is really kind of interesting. She designed the entire BIP database, and what she's most proud of is that she did it all on publicly available software. She used JavaScript and Python and all these different code things that you do in order to build the database all from scratch, which that database, I don't know if you realize, like I needed a visual, but this is an overview and they all hate that photo, but I like it because I'm not an IT person and this gives me a visual to understand the size of our database. It contains millions of records. So you can see here we have, records that have to do with Varroa. We have records that do with nosema. We have records to do with survey, with field data, with pesticides, with molecular, all the black stuff. Those are all viral data. And so we have tons and tons and tons of data in there. And part of the issue is that, then we have to, she also figured out how to automatically or design automated reports. So now we can go and put data in the database and we click a couple buttons and we get a nice little report ready to go for our beekeepers. We also created a mobile app that works for us for data collection. I don't know if any of you have tried to do any of these technology mobile application apps to collect data on your hives. it's really difficult because everybody collects different things. And so we could never find anything that worked for us. So we created one in-house, and we can just do all of our field specialists, they all use that data entry. And last year, we actually kind of launched that same one for the Sentinel program that I'm going to talk to you about, which is more for hobby beekeepers. And we're hoping that in the future, more and more people can use that. We also have the hive scale data. So there's a bunch of people that sell hive scales, and a lot of them have opened up their data and their cloud to the BIP database. So we house a lot of that information. And as anything technology-wise, it kind of expires, right? It's 10 years old now. That database is 10 years old. And so a lot of these libraries, which I'm not quite sure what that means, but whatever, a lot of these libraries don't work with our database. So just this year alone, Michaela has scrapped about 100,000 lines of code in JavaScript to kind of update it. And here in October, we're launching our new database. And what does that mean to you? The reason why I'm telling you this is because we're hoping that we will have more interface with the public in the years to come to share some of these data and to do something with those data, which would be really, really kind of cool, because I think that that is one of the challenges that we've had, one of the things that we haven't done yet very well. There's a lot of things we do well, but one thing we haven't done very well is to share our data. So hopefully this will help. The next one is, so Dennis, they get the grant in 2011. It takes about a year to actually gather everybody to kind of get going. And in the midst of all of that, Dennis gets his job at University of Maryland and starts his own lab at University of Maryland. So one of the first hire is he hires Heather Eversole, which she has another interesting story. Everybody has a really interesting story, but she studied ecology and she started working at the University of Maryland. Her first job, she was working for this professor studying sturgeon. And she was super excited because she was going into aquatic and marine biology, you know, the dream of all little girls. And the professor leaves. She finds herself with no job. And then she hears that this guy is coming to open a bee lab. She's like, well, I'm allergic to bees, but I don't know, I kind of need a job. She applies, she gets the job. She ends up basically setting up the entire lab at University of Maryland. She's the one who has figured out, streamlined the process. We get tons and tons and tons of samples. We process them for Varroa, for Nosema, for molecular. We have a person now that does only molecular viral diagnostics. And she's the one who coordinates all that. She cares. When I asked her, I said, what's your most, she says, all I want is for beekeepers to get their results on time. So when I complain that beekeepers are not getting their Nosema results on time, she takes it really seriously and does something about it. So yeah, she's a really interesting worker bee, and she's fully at University of Maryland. So this is another huge addition. Natalie Stanhauer at the time, she's from Belgium, and she is another French native speaker in our group. She looks in and finds that Dennis is looking for somebody for a PhD, and she wants to do something in entomology, but also with social insects and statistics, and she's interested in this like disease transmission. So Dennis recruits her to come and do her PhD at University of Maryland, and he asks her to work on survey data. So she spent her entire PhD working on the survey data that they were collecting at the time. And so really early on, when they first wrote the grant, they realized that they couldn't just ask beekeepers, how many colonies have you lost, right? That doesn't mean much. It's like, okay, so, but why did you lose those colonies? So they knew right away that they needed to collect information on management as well. So that's why the survey's starting to get a little longer now and then. And so she, after she graduated from her PhD, she actually kind of became the science coordinator full-time at BIP in 2018. So now I'm going to take a little bit of a break from talking about these people, and I'm going to tell you about a program. So BIP runs a couple programs, the survey being the big one that I've been talking about, and that's a lot of her work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the survey and her work. So this is where the graphs come in, Jerry, sorry. Can't be avoided. And so again, I think that we all know, well, many of you hopefully know about the Loss and Management Survey. It's the longest survey, the biggest survey in the world. In fact, COLOS now has their own in Europe, but we have the longest running survey all over the place. We open it up on April 1 all the way to May 1, so it's a full month. Whether you have 1 colony, 10 colonies, 25,000 colonies, we want that data. And so every year, Apiary Inspectors of America are really good at saying, take the BIP survey. And I know there's a little survey fatigue, so we switched to the survey last year. But I want to show you some of the cool information we can get out of this survey, right? So you take these surveys, but we never know what the results are. So Natalie worked a lot on that. So the first thing I want to show you is I want to show you, the representativeness of our survey. Since there's not a lot of other things like that, how do we know that we're actually got a good slice of the pie, right? So the only thing that we can compare it to here in the US is the Census for Agriculture, and that runs about every 5 years. So what we did here, and I've heard a lot of you guys yesterday talking about the number of colonies versus the number of beekeepers. So this is where we're going to make a little bit of the distinction. So in blue, it's the BIP survey, and in gray, it's the census survey. So let's look at the graph on the left-hand side to begin with. That's the operations. And when I talk about operations, I talk about the size of the beekeepers. So I'm talking about backyard beekeepers, sideline beekeepers, and commercial beekeepers. So if you can see here, and this is the rule of thumb, we always kind of use that as an example, 95% of the beekeepers are backyard beekeepers. But 95% of the colonies are held by the 5% of commercial beekeepers, right? So that's kind of really interesting. So there's a lot of beekeepers, but there's a very small portion of beekeepers that have a lot of colonies. So I think that that's really interesting and important to remember that. So when we compare our data with the Census for Agriculture, we can see that our percentages are pretty close. We do oversample backyard beekeepers. They have more time between April 1 and May 1. Unfortunately, our timing sucks. Beekeepers are extremely busy. Commercial beekeepers are making nukes and splitting and doing all this stuff. It's the most busiest time of the year. That's when we send our survey. So there's some things to do there. So we do oversample a little bit the backyard beekeepers. But on the other hand, if you look at colony numbers, we do get a good representation of the colony numbers for the commercial beekeepers. So we feel pretty good about that. So this is our famous colony mortality. We see it all the time, and it's always doom and gloom when everybody presents that. But I do need to bring up the point that this fuels millions of dollars in research in honeybees every year. So however doom and gloom it is, it does have a really good positive aspect to it. So I do want to show that in the first few years, we used to only ask for winter mortality. And then we realized, wait a minute, mortality doesn't only happen in the winter. So after a while, we decided to ask about summer losses too. So now we have a winter loss, an annual loss, which is the combination of both winter and summer. And you can see that the annual loss, when we were doing just winter, we didn't get the whole picture. We get a whole lot more of the picture since we've been asking about annual loss. The other thing that's interesting to look at, the yellow bar, is the acceptable losses. So we also ask beekeepers, so what do you think is acceptable to lose? And when you look over the years, it's starting to kind of go up. It seems like there's some sort of habituation to losing so many colonies that beekeepers now feel that, it started to be 15% and it's getting closer to 20% that they feel is acceptable now. In any other livestock, correct me if I'm wrong, Tracy, but in any other livestock, if this was the case, there would be a state of emergency in this entire country, but not for bees. So just keep that in mind, and that's one of the reasons why we continue to do the work on the survey. So these are all losses for all beekeepers, right? I like to break it down a little bit more. So here on the left-hand side, you have backyard beekeepers, sideliners in the middle, and commercial on the other end. Do want to point out a couple of things. It does seem that the backyard beekeepers have higher risks of losing colonies in the winter compared to commercial beekeepers, which seem to have their losses all throughout the year. I like to explain some of that. I have a hunch that, commercial beekeepers, they don't try to put a little colony through the winter to try to see if it's going to make it. They take a lot of time. There's an old adage in beekeeping that says, take your losses in the fall, right? So commercial beekeepers are really good at that. In the fall, they look at their colonies, they combine, they do all this, they do all that in order to send whatever they think is going to be strong enough to survive the winter. So I think that that's one of the reasons why they sustain more what we call annual losses rather, compared to winter losses. But I do want to point out, because I think that that is often, when I first started in bees and before I made the jump to working with commercial beekeepers, I heard all sorts of things, and a lot of people sometimes kind of seems to think that commercial beekeepers, because they have big numbers, they do things like, and it's a job, or they do things in a different way that's not necessarily always best for bees. Well, I can tell you, I work with commercial beekeepers and they love their bees and they do well and they do better. So I do want to point out that commercial beekeepers, on average, even though they have a lot more colonies than the backyard beekeepers, they lose fewer colonies each year than the backyard beekeepers. So just want to point that out. This might be explained by the next one I have here up on the survey. Again, backyard on the left and all the way to the commercial. This number is staggering, if you ask me. We just heard from Jackie, there's like 5, of her family. The backyard beekeepers tend to have levels of experience that are, they're beginning beekeepers. And I think that some of you are here, so some of you can kind of gather that. It's become really popular. And so the average, the median level of expertise for backyard beekeeper is 5 years. And if you compare that to the staggering, to me that's a staggering number. Can you imagine having a median of 37 years of experience? Boy, we have tons to learn from you guys. We really, really do. And I've really enjoyed working with commercial beekeepers and learning so much. One more thing that we can tease out is the self-reported causes of loss, which I think is very interesting. And this is a complicated, it's not great, too busy. But the backyards are in blue and the commercial are in red. The sidelines are always kind of in between. So that's interesting to me. If you look at the commercial beekeepers' self-reported losses, they're mainly, very mainly, varroa issues and queen issues. And then when you look at the backyard beekeepers, then all of a sudden there's like all these other reasons, right? So varroa is there, queen issue is there, but there's also scavenger, equipment failure, unknown, pesticides. I mean, name it, they're there. So I find it very interesting, and that I think is related to the level of expertise. Again, is like in the first few years, I get calls all the time. My colony died. They had everything. They didn't have any varroa. What happened to them? So I think that that has to relates again to the level of expertise. I do want to talk about, because it's often doom and gloom in bees, I do want to talk about something that's really, to me, encouraging. This is a change of behavior through the years that we are now seeing, which I think is really encouraging. So the bars in red, which says false, those are basically people who are not using a treatment. And the bars in yellow are the ones that are actually using a varroa treatment. And so over the years, since 2012 all the way to 2020, you can see that the people who are not treating for varroa are decreasing, and the people that are treating for varroa are increasing. And I think that that is pretty amazing that we can tell this from the survey. We would not have this data. This is a decade of data. And it's interesting to me to see that information. So let's break it down again between the backyards and the commercial beekeepers. Whoops, sorry. So backyards are here, commercial are there. You can see that the commercial people were, to begin with, very low in not monitoring and not treating, but it has pretty much disappeared from the commercial operation, which I think is really great because they have the greatest number of colonies. And you can see also the change in behavior also in the backyard beekeepers and the sideliners. So this to me means that some of these talks that we're doing, some of this, these clubs that we're really kind of putting together, it's the message is coming across and beekeepers are more and more hands-on. And when I talk about treatment, I mean, in this particular case, we're not even necessarily talking about a chemical. We're talking about an action management to kind of do something to prevent or control varroa or a pest in the colony. And I think that what's really interesting is in this one, we're also showing monitoring, and monitoring is also something that is like no monitoring compared to monitoring has also changed quite a bit. So those are all interesting things that we can bring out of the survey. All righty, look, she's coming up. That's me. So I wasn't going to talk much about myself, but after hearing all of you women talking, I feel like I was connecting with each and every one of you throughout the 2 days. And it was freaking fantastic to see all that. And then I'm like, okay, but now I want to tell them about that. But now I want to tell them about that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I'm from Quebec. And so I actually was born and raised, well, partly raised. And then I moved to the South Shore of Montreal. But I was born to a banker. And I say that with a because a banker, I don't think my father could even maybe put a picture on the wall. I don't know. And then my mom was an administrator for old folks home, which was, great. And she was a good cook. But my father came from a family of 18 kids. And my mom from a family of 9, and she was the oldest. And so she took care of all her friends. And so when she got with my dad, she said, I don't want any kids. And my dad had been in the middle of the 18 and was kind of doted on by the older ones and whatever. And so he says, well, how about one? So I'm an only child. Oh, yeah. I live in the suburbs with a banker who can't, put a picture on a wall, a mom who cooks but goes to work every day. And here I am getting all dirty, grabbing grasshoppers and, putting them in daddy long legs. I used to just kind of grab them by one leg and anyway. So I was always outside. I was collecting all the animals. I was feeding everything. And my parents just didn't know what to do with me. So of course I wanted nothing to do with the business world. It would have been way too easy to go into business. My father was a banker and knew all these business people, could have hooked me up. That would have been way too easy. I didn't want that. So of course I go into biology to begin with. But before I went into biology, I wanted to be a vet. I went to private Catholic school. It was all girls. And when I got out of high school in Quebec, it works that you don't go from high school to college. You go to CEGEP in between. And CEGEP is kind of like your preparatory classes. It's like your first year of gen eds, if you want, before you go to college. So I'm having a blast, and I do not get into vet school. That was my biggest dream, shattered. So what do you do when you can't get into vet school? You go into biology. So I went into biology, and I kept trying. I needed to do a little maturing, I think. So then I went to work and I did all sorts of stuff. I worked on a golf course, did all sorts of things. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Then I ended up doing a program. I went to do a master's and I got wildlife management, a master's in wildlife management. So what am I going to do with my life? So I'm at the same place as some of these women are saying, what are you going to do? I have this degree. I don't have a job. And so somebody kept on telling me I'd be good at teaching. So I'm like, I'm not a teacher. I'm a biologist. I really wanted to say I was a biologist and a scientist. But so I said, okay, fine, I'll go do a teaching degree. So I end up in Rhode Island. Why Rhode Island? I think I had met a boy somewhere. There must have been a boy somewhere involved. Anyway, go to Rhode Island, get my education degree, and I come back to Quebec and I start teaching. And in my first year, I'm like, I'm a biologist and I can teach. Second year, I'm like, I'm a biology teacher. And by the third year, I'm like, give me anything. I'm a teacher. I can teach. And it doesn't matter what. So I kept teaching for a couple of years, but while I was in Rhode Island, I had another boy, and that one stuck. So maybe that's when I started, kind of getting a little maturity. I got married. And so we moved back to the US. And we were moving to Michigan at the time because he wanted to make a change. And so we moved to Michigan, and that's when I learned English. No, I'm just kidding. I had learned English when I was younger, but my English wasn't very good. And I still, to this day, most people don't pick my accent all the time, but some people will pick it up right away. And the problem is I still put the accent on the wrong syllable all the time, right? So we don't have these tonic accent in French, so it's like really difficult. Anyway, I come here, I have 2 masters now, and we decide to have a kid. So I'm like, okay, I'll stay home. So at one point I did think, should I go do a PhD? And then all the people I knew had continued on and went and got a PhD, and now they were all in these labs, and they were all feeling the pressure that Hungmei was talking about earlier, and like a work-life balance, and Jerry and all of you were talking about earlier. And I didn't want that. I said, I don't think I can take that. I mean, I have tons of energy, but I don't know that I want to do that. So I didn't. I kept going around with my 2 little masters, and I said, I don't think I need to do that. And after my son was 5 and I wanted to go back to work, I started teaching a few courses at Grand Valley State University, where my husband, who's an astrophysicist, I married a rocket scientist, so I didn't have to do it. And so he was teaching there, so I started teaching labs, and I started teaching this and that and the other thing. And I was at a campus that was a satellite campus, where so I was teaching a little bit like you with, sociologists, and, I had an English professor and all of these different people, which is really interesting to do. And then they gave me a job. They actually gave me a professorship to teach interdisciplinary studies, which at first I didn't even know what it was. My first course was about creativity. I'm about as creative as a box of rocks. I have no creativity, and now I'm supposed to teach it. But I had said earlier, give me something and I can teach it. So I figured it out and I taught that course. And then I became a little bit better at interdisciplinary study. And then I was teaching, I put all this stuff together. So all these things I'm telling you, because all of this was my mix match. And I started teaching environmental studies, not science, but studies, and sustainability studies, which is all the 4Ps, right? Planet, people, profit, blah, blah, blah. So I start doing that, and I get really involved with the food system. I was teaching nutrition at the time for humans and, all that sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden, I feel like everybody's teaching about food. And in my food journey, somebody took me into a beehive. And then it was really interesting to hear Kim this morning say that for him it was those 3 breaths. Because for me, it wasn't about breaths. It was about the cover that you lift, and there's a whole world organized in there. And I'm like a little bit of an organized freak. Like, I like things to be all nice and neat in a little box. And that's what bees were doing. So I wanted to know how they were doing this, and I started asking questions, and I haven't stopped yet. So I got into bees only recently. I was teaching at a university. I bring bees to the university. I get a grant to work with students on bee nutrition around our university. And I do all this, but I really, not a PhD. I don't really know much about bees at this point. I'm 3 years into beekeeping. So I kind of bullshitted my way in. Dennis has told me once, fake it till you make it. And I'm still faking it, my friends. So I did this for a couple of years, and whatever the project that I was doing at the university, I don't have an entomology department or anything. So I brought it to the Bee Informed Partnership. I was all in awe and gaga at Dennis and Bip at the time. And so I kind of would go to the conferences and saddle up to people and just kind of start talking to them. And, I was like totally starstruck. Like, some people like rock stars. I like the Dennis and the Sukobi and I was just like always, oh. So I do that. And eventually, a couple of years later, BIP posts this job about working with the tech transfer team. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's my home. It's about time I found it. It was 40 plus years, and I think that that's finally what I figured out I wanted to do with my life. And I've been doing that since then. So that was 4 years ago, and here I am today telling you all about it. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the Tech Transfer Team program and what we do. That's my program, so of course I think that's the best at BIP. The survey is great, Sentinel is great, but the Tech Transfer Team is the best. So we're really the boots on the ground. And our field specialists basically do all sorts of things. They do colony inspections, a little bit like the apiary inspectors do. This is a fee for service. Beekeepers pay for this. They will bring us in, and we do colony inspections, we do diagnostics, consulting. We create these reports as to, here's a snapshot of what is going on in your colonies at this time. And we do hygienic testing and do all of those. We do some research trials, we do some emergency visits, we do all sorts of things. What's really fun is that it grew. So we started with this one team in Northern California doing hygienic testing with queen breeders, but then soon enough, the other beekeepers in other regions said, hey, we want tech transfer teams too. It wasn't necessarily for hygienic testing, but it was for just simply, sometimes it was varroa monitoring, nosema monitoring, viral, pesticide, etc. So the yellow dots are where we have regions. We have 5 regions in the US, and the orange dots, or red, whatever color they are all the states in which we provide services in. And so we, this year in particular, and changes from year to year, there's some rotation. We have about 70 commercial beekeepers that we work with in all these different regions. Together, they manage over 500,000 colonies, which is approximately 16 to 17% of the honeybee colonies in the US. So my field specialists, and I call them mine, like we are my kids, but the field specialists, sorry, I have a hard time. So the field specialists kind of have this bird's eye view And so collectively, they don't have the median levels of experience that the commercial beekeepers have. But what they have is a different kind of experience. They actually have this broad view of multiple operations. And so they can really kind of discuss with beekeepers, well, in this area, this kind of work, in this area, this doesn't work. Some of the beekeepers I know tried this and it worked really well for them. Of course, all of this is done confidential, right? And the blue dot is, of course, the University of Maryland Diagnostic Lab. So that's what we do there. Do our programs make a difference? You know, when I first came in 4 years ago, I'm like, okay, I want to know, do we do all this work for nothing? You know, does it actually work? So when we pick the ones that selected that they do the tech transfer team program as their sampling monitoring method compared to the ones who didn't, they lose 13 percentage points fewer colonies each year than beekeepers that do not partake in our services. So somewhere along the way, we must make a little bit of a difference. And then when I look at Varroa loads and prevalence, so loads is how many mites there are in your colonies, prevalence is how many of your colonies have mites in them. You can see that in green, teal. I don't know why I keep using these colors. Anyway, the dark one is the ones who participate in the tech transfer team, and then the yellow ones are the ones who don't. And so you can see that when it comes to both loads and prevalence, when it comes to Varroa, our tech transfer team members are always below the national average, which is the APHIS national survey I was telling you earlier. But what's more important is that in general, and this is in 2020, but we see this pretty consistently, in general, our beekeepers keep their Varroa lower than the actual threshold, which is pretty impressive if you think about it. So our program does do something fun and works. Okay, done talking about myself. So now the big grant is expiring. Big, large grant expiring. That's never a good moment in a nonprofit organization. BIP is a nonprofit organization. Big grant expiring. Now we need to figure out how to either one, be sustainable, which I have no idea if you know, but it costs a crap load of money to get these field specialists out to the beekeepers. We need truck, we need equipment, we need salaries, we need like all sorts of stuff. It's super expensive. The beekeepers used to be subsidized by that big grant. They were subsidized like about 65%. They would pay about 35% of the cost. Well, in 2019, we couldn't no longer go there because we didn't have that big grant anymore. We now subsidize only barely 30%, and the beekeepers have to pick up that tab, 65 to 70%. We had to double our prices that year, which is one of the reasons why we lost some beekeepers who they couldn't afford us anymore, which I totally understand. And so how do we go back to providing this service, but at not so much money? When I write a grant, it's for a project. It's great, but that doesn't give me operational money. So this money thing is really, really a drag in my life. So, you know, a nonprofit organization, that's where it all goes. It's trying to figure out how to be sustainable and how to keep the money coming in. So we hired a part-time grant writer. So Jerry she's a doctor in mycology. She's got a doctorate working with fungus, which is really kind of interesting to me how she became our grant writer. But of course, she got stuck in the bees, just like a lot of us. You know, we kind of start beekeeping, and then all of a sudden, we just want to do that full time. So she joined the team in 2019, and she really kind of streamlined the grant writing process and the project reports, and hopefully we see more money coming in. But one of the things that we need to do, I don't need to just talk about money, but one of the things we need to do is we need to start approaching corporate sponsorship and some of these big companies that have tons of money, and that's what they want to do is kind of support some of these people. Next came Rachel Kuipers, our next little honeybee worker. She's this young, tiny little thing. She graduated in journalism, and she was working as an undergrad in the lab. And then we had a pilot project back in 2015 that started, which was called the Sentinel Apiary Program, which might be of interest to some of you starting beekeepers. This is more for hobby beekeepers. And so she basically, it kind of grew, and she became the coordinator of that program in 2020. So I'm going to give you a little overview of what the Sentinel Apiary Program is. So beekeepers monitor anywhere between 4 and 8 colonies for a 6-month period from May to October. And what that means is that you basically identify 8 colonies in May, you tag them, You have an app that you can use as well as some data sheet. We give you all the information and we send you a nice little kit with some little bottles. And so you take the information, brood pattern, colony size, and all the stuff that we ask you to do. And then you fill your little bottles with a small sample of bees. You ship that to the lab, and the lab will actually look at Varroa, Nosema. And this year we did, for the first time, we did a pesticide sample as well. And then you get a report each month of how those 8 colonies are doing. So I will tell you that before I even worked at BIP, I participated in BIP. Remember how I was kind of in love with BIP? So I participated in this Sentinel program. And I can tell you that that is where my beekeeping went from poor beekeeping to knowing what was going on in beekeeping and learning a whole lot more. I stopped losing bees with this program because I think that once you monitor your colonies and you know what's going on in your colonies, it's really hard not to do something about it and not to be on top of things. And that's how you keep colonies alive, right? So I think that for me, anyway, the Sentinel Apiary program really kind of got my beekeeping. I became a better beekeeper. I still have lots to learn, but I became a better beekeeper because of that program. And so, again, it's just that overall, you need to have 4 or 8 colonies, and now we let you split them. You can do this as a club. A club can actually get a Sentinel apiary and use it. I was the president of my local club, and I used to use the monthly collection as a group, a club participation. I would have some people coming in. I would show them how to do an inspection. I would show them how to do an alcohol wash. We would do that. And then I would look at the number of mites, send my bees into the University of Maryland, get my report. And the next meeting I would start with the report and say, this is what we got last month. What should we do about this? Varroa is high, Varroa is low, So it was really good for the club, as a club, to kind of study and follow and show its participants how to monitor their colonies throughout the year. So you can split them. Let's say you don't have 8 colonies and you want to do this. Maybe you and your neighbors do this. You get 4 each. Or you can get 4 and then you do 2 each. It doesn't matter. It's really a program. It's a citizen scientist program. You send in your data, we collect your data, and you become a better beekeeper in the process. I mean, isn't that like the best deal ever? I thought you would think so. Does this program work, right? Again, I go back to my same question. And so if you look over here, Sentinel program is in red, and then the national average is in blue, and you can see that the Varroa is lower in the Sentinel participant than it is in the national average all months of the year. Again, there's got to be something to this, right? So big grants running out. The original team, Karen and Dennis, they have brought this on. They started it, they grew it. And so it's time for them to kind of retire. And so they are looking for a new executive director, bring in new blood now that they have parceled all these different jobs to Natalie, to Jerry, to myself. And so they're trying to now say, okay, we need somebody new at the helm, somebody to breathe some new life into BIP and to kind of figure out where it's going. So they hire Annette Meredith, which is our new executive director. She got us into a strategic planning process and hopefully leading us towards the future. I'm breathing like this because she got in during COVID. So it was really, really hard for her. So we're not done with the strategic process. I feel like it's dragging, and I'm a go-getter. I'm not very patient, as Kim has noticed. And so for me, this has been dragging on, and I just want this to move. So Net comes in not from the bee world. So it's interesting. She comes in more from a nonprofit and environmental world. And so she's really leading the strategic process and hopefully figuring out what our mission, kind of redefining what our mission is. So she can bring that to the corporate sponsors and say, we need money for doing this mission. So we're kind of in between 2 chairs right now. We're continuing on with what we've done, but we are just kind of like trying to figure out where we're going. So with that, I'm going to finish with the important contributions from BIP. I think that one of the biggest contributions that we have done at BIP is this data baseline for colony loss and management. So before us, there was nothing, before you, Jerry, in 2007, and then BIP, there was no data on colony losses in the US. So I think that that's a really important contribution, again, fueling millions of dollars in research. We also have a huge colony health database. So this is the part where it's a big contribution. but there's a lot of work left to do here. I think that in the beginning, a lot of things were promised with this database. You know, they were saying, hey, we're going to collect all this data and we're going to give you all these answers. Well, we've been collecting all these data for 10 years, but we haven't given too many answers out there. And so we need to work on that. We need to be better at, so I don't know if you know, but these ginormous databases, they're so dirty. Anybody that's worked with a data set, it is so dirty. You have to kind of clean all this information up. And so we got really, really good at collecting data. And now we're all standardized and we got the app and all of this, but it's really complicated. It's not that easy. So we have some work to do there, although I did say that this was a contribution. We also standardize data collection and sample in the field. We have industry people, product people, all sorts of people that are calling us up now. Okay, so how do you do this in the field? What do we need to collect in the field? How do we do this field trial? We're really good at field trial. We don't do lab stuff. We don't have our own bees. We do it with the commercial beekeepers in the real commercial setting. So what we do, nobody else does. So I think that that's another important contribution. I think that we've helped with the message that monitoring for your colonies is the most important thing you can do for your colonies. So for you new beekeepers, you know, monitoring is the key to your success. And the next thing that we did is we ended up with, I think, a pretty strong partnership with a vast network, whether it's within the research world. We're partnering with all sorts of universities and researchers. Industry world, they're not starting to like us very much because we've been testing a lot of product and saying they don't work. So they like us a little less right now, but that's okay. And our vast network of beekeepers. And we have worked really hard, really, really hard to have strong relationship with our beekeepers. And what we really need to do next is we need to support them better. So what I really want to do, I came in 4 years ago, and first year I listened and I traveled a lot. I went to all these beekeepers to try to listen to what they needed. I learned tons. And they're finally starting to return my calls. For years, they wouldn't even talk to me. They would only talk to the field specialist. So I think that I'm starting to figure out, you know, what the needs are out there, and we want to better support beekeepers, all from commercials to sentinel and hobby beekeepers. So that's really what I want to focus more on. I think we need to streamline the survey. So the survey became ginormous. I don't know if you took the survey like 3 years ago, but oh my gosh, it would take like an hour and a half almost to take that survey. It was ridiculous. It was like an essay. But you need to ask a lot of questions. The 2 years ago, we revised that, and now we ask only one management theme per year. So last year was environment. The year before that was queen. Next year, I don't know what it was, but in order to streamline and shorten the survey a little bit. We're launching BIP 3.0, hopefully more interface with the public and more information getting out there, which is one of the things I said we really needed to work on. Also, we want to develop more custom service. So a queen breeder does not need the same kind of service than a honey producer or that a pollinator does. And so for me, for my program in the tech transfer team, I really want to kind of start developing more customized programs. So that's one thing that I want to work on, and I will continue to do field trial. I love writing protocols, setting up little trials in the field. I love it. I love it. I love it. There's nothing more fun than that, I think. And then I want to increase citizen science participation to track backyard beekeeping trends. So all of you are going to sign up for Sentinel, right? And so those are some of the contributions that I think that you can look forward to. Hoping that we attain financial sustainability, we put our name out there, that more people know about us. So that's really kind of what we want to do. So the future of BIP, these are the women, the worker bees that I've talked to you about, but it is not just about them. It's also, poor Eric, he's the only administrative guy that I talked about. And then we have the IT people, and then we have the field specialists, which are my heart and soul. These guys work so hard. They travel all over the U.S. They put 100,000 miles on the truck every year, and they work from dusk till dawn, weekends, weeks on end. They are amazing. You know, I'm just privileged to work with these people, really. And then we have other people from the lab. And then, of course, all of the mobile tech team. I now have people that I can call in to say, I need some extra hands in the field over there. A lot of these people we've talked about before. Megan Mahoney is there. Katie Lee is there. Emily is there. Anna Heck, which is at MSU in Michigan. So all of these people make for this amazing, amazing team that I work with. And as I said, it's the hive. I do need to say a special thank you to Melissa there. who totally helped me with this format of this PowerPoint. I couldn't figure out the octagonal and the pictures in there. And so anyway, she helped me with some of that. So that was really, really cool. As I said, I don't do anything. I just work with fabulous people. Here are logos of all the partners that we work in the industry and in research. Thank you so much, Jerry. This has been fantastic.